everybody, and welcome to today's event, which is on Pathways to a Just Transition. The event is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Environment of Germany, by the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy of the UK, by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Canada, and by the Powering Past Coal Alliance. Thank you all for coming today. I think it's indicative of the huge amount of interest that we have in this issue. I know this COP has been characterised as the blue COP, but I think it's also very much a just transition COP on the number of events we've had here and the focus we've had on coal and the phase out from that. Now, what we'd like to do today, we've got two panels and very high level speakers who've also been very strongly involved in the just transition process in their own countries and internationally. And the opportunity we have today is to ask those, to hear from those speakers, and also to ask them questions about some of the behind the scenes stuff. So what happened in those processes, how were the policy decisions made, what were the lessons learned? It's my great pleasure and an honour, and a little bit scary with the level of people we have here today, to be your moderator. My name is Peter Wooders. I'm the Senior Director of ISD's Energy Programme based in Geneva, and our work is about helping governments to identify and then implement sustainable development solutions in the energy sector and wider there. Just transition, of course, is very much part of our priorities, and we released a paper last year funded by the BMU here, called Real People, Real Change, Strategies for a Just Transition, and I'll be referring to some of the framework and some of the ideas in that to try and structure the conversation today. But enough about me. First part of our conversation today, we're very lucky to have three of the leading figures worldwide in just transition today. They are in front of you on the panel here, and each of them will give us some opening remarks and a keynote to begin with. So could I first call to the dais Mr. Jochen Flatbach. I'm sure all of you know Jochen already, but he's been the State Secretary of the Ministry of Environment since 2013 and achieved a lot during that time. Was previously the President of the Federal Environment Agency, and then a theme that comes up again and again today, he was before that President of Nature and the Biodiversity Conservation Union, which is one of Germany's oldest and largest NGOs. So many of the panelists today have mixed histories and have used that in their government role and have been in other roles as well. So, State Secretary Flatbach, the floor is yours. You're welcome to speak from there or from here, as you wish.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and the longer the CV becomes, that is announced at the beginning, the more nervous I become. But I'm very happy to be together with two very good friends here on this first panel of our meeting here, side event, Pathways to Just Transition. Is it heard? Okay. When we discussed just transition in New York the first time, or basically in a broad community the first time, when it was about the SDGs, the 2030 agenda, it sounds for many people a little bit like something nice to have. So there is the real stuff, and then we should do it in a just way. And I think most of the people, at least in my country, and maybe in yours as well, I don't know, you will share it with us, thought about just transition as something to happen in the developing countries, that leaving nobody behind is speaking about the global south. But now I think we have a broad understanding that just transition is something integral if you want to reach our global targets, not only on climate change, greenhouse gas neutrality, and hopefully many industrialized countries of the global north, and followed by emerging economies and developing countries later on as soon as possible. And this needs, as I said, an integration of just transition, of social issues with these transformative processes. We organized one of our Petersburg dialogues 2 years ago, actually on this specific topic, because we thought that we have to bring it into the center of the debate. Also looking at the development in our own country. And that is what I just want to briefly share with you, the experiences we made. And specifically, as this is a sort of topic here of this today's side event in the area of the coal industry. Coal industry is in Germany, looking from the national perspective, not a really relevant factor. Looking at our whole national economy, it is important, but it's not the most important part. And we still do have overcapacities in the production of electricity. So we are exporting electricity, sometimes like hell, to our neighbors. Sometimes they are happy. In France, for example, when they have to shut down their nuclear power plants because it's too cold or too hot or too dry. But sometimes we are puzzling their markets. You're a bit out in UK because you're not so much connected with the continental grid, but we are connected, and these overcapacities are a burden for some of our neighbors. Because we are puzzling their markets. So what I want to say, it's not that we need this coal, at least at the moment, to cover our electricity needs. It's not so relevant for our national economy, and we know also how to run a national economy without coal. It's not that we do not have the technologies, that we do not know how to organize it. The basic problem for us is that it's a regional economy problem and it's a social problem. We have basically 2 to 3 areas where we do have lignite production, which is a domestic resource, a quite cheap resource, by the way, if you exclude the environmental costs at least, and they are setting one big region for lignite production south of Berlin, our capital, and the other one in the Rhine Valley where I'm coming from. And they are quite different. In the Rhine Valley, we do have very powerful economic structures, so it's not so difficult. I mean, my whole region would shout at me now, but it's not so difficult to organize the transformation in this region. In south of Berlin, it's more or less a monostructured region. We didn't invest after reunification into alternative industrial structures, and that now becomes the real challenge. How to organize the transformation in this region where we already saw a tremendous deindustrialization after unification, and we had a lot of chemical industry, steel industry, you name it, in this part of Germany, and this disappeared, and now these people are facing a second round of losing their jobs. With all the political price we have to pay if we don't find solid solutions to transform their jobs. And we organized the process of phasing out coal to be accompanied by a commission with all stakeholders that are connected to this issue. So trade unions, industry, NGOs, environmental NGOs, participants from the respective regions, both pro-coal and anti-coal. So we brought them all around the table. We asked them to come up with a piece of advice, preferably a consensus when and how to phase out coal. They did so. The recommendation was to phase out coal the latest by 2038, preferably by 2035, and also with some milestones in between, but also with a very, very strong statement for structured support schemes for the respective regions. And that is how we organize it now. We came up with a support program, we put it into law, it passed cabinet, and now we are working on the Phase Out Coal Law, the Phase Out Coal Act. And we did it on purpose to start with a structural change law that organize the investment into the new structures, and soon afterwards now, the phase-out Cold War. We are happy to share this with our friends around the world. We are happy to be part, and we were accepted. We know that it was not easy to accept us for the Power at Pascal Alliance, and we want to be part of this global movement to organize the transformation, not to hesitate, but also to accompany it with structural supports. And we do so also by supporting some regions in the world. For example, 20 million we are supporting the energy regions in Southeast Asia. Another 20 million we spend in just transition processes in co-regions in developing countries. So we want to support these countries, these regions, but more than that, we want to discuss, we want to learn from others, we want to exchange our experiences together to make a better world.
They look to this transition as well. Our second speaker today is the Right Honourable Claire O'Neill. I don't think she needs too much of an introduction to most of you here today. She's the COP26 President and previously served as the Minister of State at BES from 2017 to July of 2019, when she was appointed to be the President of COP26 by Premier Boris Johnson. Been a Member of Parliament since 2010 and held a variety of roles in government, including on the Justice Select Committee representing Britain at the Council of Europe, and been parliamentary aide to the Secretary of State for Defence. So Claire, the floor is yours, and we're very keen to hear about what's been happening in the UK and of course internationally, your thoughts as well.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much, Emil. Great, and it's wonderful actually to hear Joachim set out the challenge of powering Pascal, and I'll say a little bit about that. Powering Pascal was a good idea that Catherine McKenna, my friend from Canada, and I had a couple of years ago in New York over a cup of coffee during the Action Summit, where we said, you know, our countries are really doing some incredible things. The UK has committed to be coal-free in its energy generation system by 2025, Canada by 2030. Do you think we can do something with this, mark the fact that our countries are taking some tough decisions with our energy mix? And so the idea of PPCA was born. We thought we might get a handful of other members. We're now up to 97, and it was an absolute pleasure to welcome Germany as what we've basically called an associate membership, i.e. not going to meet the 2030 target, but as one of the major coal users in the EU, an incredible example of what setting a target with an appropriate transition plan can do. And we are also excited that we've welcomed not just national governments, but subnational governments, states, utilities, cities, a really important part of that bottom-up transition that we are just looking forward to. And you know, we all, I'm sure everyone in this room is absolutely convinced that if the world could do one thing, it would be stop burning coal, both for its GHG emissions profile, but also for the problems with air quality and other pollutants. But it would be completely wrong to suggest that this is a pure economic argument. I'm fed up with people telling me that of course a country should move to renewables because the economics of renewables are so compelling. And I'd like to share with you that that would be like asking Britain in the 1970s under a government that was heavily dependent on the support of the unions, and indeed the unions that were particularly strong in coal mining countries, to make essentially a leap of faith. And so this is for me not an energy transition that will be based on economics. It is an energy transition that has to pay due respect and plan for the social and political consequences that will come from some of these major decisions. And if we are to truly make this transition, I think as Joachim set out, understanding what that looks like for a country, not just the technicalities of potentially changing the generation mix and thinking hard about what your base load might be, but also what is the just transition that's required, often at a very local or regional level, for those industries and those employees, and the social cohesion that goes around that. You know, in some parts of the world, we know that coal mines and coal-fired power stations are major agents of social delivery. That is where the schools are, that is where the hospitals are, that is what pays for social structure. So I think we need to move away from coal. We need to make coal history as rapidly as possible, but we need to do that in a way that is absolutely seized of the reality on the ground and works with that reality, whether it is mobilising finance, whether it is sharing the experiences of countries who are going through this process, and ultimately celebrating and supporting countries and subnational actors that want to reach this goal. I am married to a coal miner's son. My husband's father was a trade unions leader in the United Kingdom. He trained a very famous union leader called Arthur Scargill. I'm sure my father-in-law would have been turning in his grave at the idea of his son marrying a Conservative minister, although of course we agree on far more than we disagree on. But it has been very striking to see that transition in the United Kingdom, a very painful political transition, done in a very different way. Yes, the economic case was clear, but the social needs, I think, were not well addressed in that transition. And once we had moved ourselves away from a domestic coal supply, the question of then how you transition using, as we did in the UK, air quality measures and a unilateral carbon tax on generation, it became a much easier thing. Because of course the final piece of the puzzle is energy security. Again, something I don't think we talk enough about when we talk about energy substitutions. Now, renewables are an ultimate source of energy security. That is absolutely clear. But the transition can be tough. And if you're asking a country essentially to give up on a domestic energy source in order to spend valuable foreign currency, potentially importing another fossil fuel, maybe one with a lower GHG emissions profile, that is a very major strategic and economic decision for a country. So I hope that we can build momentum at PPCA, and we can take the examples of countries like Germany, countries like Slovakia, one of another country who has joined us recently, again dealing with this tough transition. And I hope we can make coal history, but we can do so in a way that absolutely works with the political, social and energy security aspects that we know are exercising the best minds in making that transition. And please, if we can do anything to help, as one of the co-founding members with Canada, with our own experiences and with the experiences then of how you do bring renewables into the mix in a way that does create that energy security, we stand by and ready to help you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claire. Very inspiring and an excellent lesson for us from history, and also it was really taken, how you mentioned, the need for the complementary policies around renewables and energy efficiency and carbon pricing to help support the alternatives. I think you may have to leave us now for a bilateral. I'm sure you're...
Thank you. Speak to you later. I'm so sorry, this is like speed dating.
Good. And our third speaker in the high-level segment to begin is Her Excellency Patricia Fuller. Thank you so much for joining us today, Patricia. Patricia is the Ambassador for Climate Change of Canada. It's a wonderful thing that there are now ambassadors for climate change. It's a relatively recent job, and of course one that we all very much welcome. Patricia advises both the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and the Minister of Foreign Affairs on how Canada can best advance its climate change priorities on the world stage. She has a long history in government, particularly on trade and economic policy, but also working on energy efficiency, natural resources, clean growth, and across the whole sort of gamut. So again, a wonderful experience to bring to this topic today. So, Your Excellency, the floor is yours. Really keen to hear about the just transition issues in Canada and more widely as well in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good morning to all of you. Bonjour. C'est un plaisir d'être ici. It's a special pleasure to be having this event in the German pavilion, and I want to thank Jochen for hosting us. It was an important moment for the Powering Past Coal Alliance when Germany joined us. So I really feel to be here under this roof, and we do have a roof, which is great. Not all of these venues have roofs. Is quite symbolic in the road that the PPCA has traveled in 2 short years, to start with approximately 25 members and to now be very near 100 members. We added 6 more members at this COP. So this alliance has certainly driven a very important momentum around the challenge of phasing out coal globally. It has placed that challenge firmly on the international agenda, and we've seen the UN Secretary General take up that challenge in setting out the goal in the Climate Action Summit in September that there should be no new coal plants built after 2020. So we're making progress, but emissions from coal continue to rise, so there's definitely more work to do. And part of that work is indeed an exchange of expertise around this challenge of just transition. And this is what this event is focused on today, because, as has been said by my colleagues, to make this work, it has to be a transition that protects and supports the interests of workers and communities. So the Powering Past Coal Alliance is a forum to exchange that experience and expertise and support each other. I like to think of it as a mutual support group in how to do this in the right way. And so the Powering Past Coal Alliance has established a Just Transition Task Force within the Alliance just earlier this year. It brings together academics, labor groups, and governments to share best practices, and it's really a source of expertise for members in the Alliance. So this is a value proposition to those of you who represent countries who have not yet joined, or subnational governments who have not yet joined. Many of our members are states, provinces, cities. This is an offer to you that if you are looking to adopt this goal of coal phase-out, joining the Powering Past Coal Alliance gives you access to expertise about how to do that. And in the Canadian context, what we did was first to set the goal, of course, coal phase-out by 2030. Ontario had done it already, and they're already experiencing the benefits. They've gone from 50 smog days a year to 0. But we do have other provinces that are still using coal. And so what the Government of Canada did was establish a task force on just transition for Canadian coal power workers and communities, co-chaired by the Canadian Labour Congress, and composed of experts from environmental organizations, academia, many members from the labor community, and it issued its report earlier this year. The government has dedicated $185 million to support infrastructure, skills development, and economic diversification in response to the recommendations of the task force. So that is our approach, and internationally, we were pleased at Katowice last year to be a signatory to the Solidarity and Just Transition Silesia Declaration. And like Germany and the United Kingdom, we have committed important funding to support developing countries in making the transition to clean energy. We have funds in the multilateral development banks that have supported many renewable energy projects, as well as energy efficiency and energy storage. And we have just, as a new window of support, we have established a fund at the World Bank specifically for Southeast Asia and South Africa, dedicated on energy transition. So that is an element we recognize as we've been able to move forward with this. We have to help developing countries to do so as well. And we think that it's, at this point in time, more important than ever that we join forces to raise ambition for climate action, but in a way that supports workers and communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And you mentioned there in your intervention about the Just Transition Task Force around coal at federal level. And I wondered if you could give us a little more thoughts on who do we need to have in those sort of task forces?
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Certainly. This is indeed, I think the magic of this is to bring all of the concerned parties around the table. So the task force itself had a broad and diverse membership. As I referenced just recently, it was co-chaired by the Canadian Labour Congress, as well as the Conservation Council of New Brunswick, and it had membership from various labour organizations, as well as academics and community leaders, municipalities, and industry. But equally importantly to the membership of the task force was the process and who they went and met with. So it was a very extensive set of conversations across the country that the task force traveled to have with communities, of course, communities directly affected by coal phase-out, local workers' organizations, companies in the coal power sector, clean tech companies as well, because companies that are focused on innovations to make this transition happen are the opportunity side of this equation. The financial sector, so investors with views on how to make the transition happen with financial support, as well as academics with insight into how to make the transition most effectively. So really deep conversations with all these types of experts over a process of around a year of traveling to meet with all these organizations, and then to produce this report for the government to take a set of recommendations, and now we're in the process of responding to that.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And I think I would recommend anyone to have a look at that report and the 10 recommendations that it comes up with. It really is a state-of-the-art piece of work. While we've still got you with us, State Secretary, I wanted to ask you as well, the Ambassador just mentioned there a year for the process in Canada, more or less. Can you give some reflections on the Coal Commission in Germany, and sort of how long did you run the process for, and what we could learn from that?
Well, the Commission consumed, I guess, something around 8 months. So I think it's sufficient, and as we are now, as a government, needed 11 months before coming up with a phasing out coal act. I think it was sufficient for them. Maybe we could speed up our governmental processes now. But what I wanted to, on the substance, what I wanted to share with you, I think, at least in Germany, you need some time if you bring people together coming from very different audiences to get a common understanding what you are talking about. And for example, some of them, I don't name them, came to the group with the impression that Germany is a climate champion, that we are the best anyway. And to make them understand that an Indian or an Ethiopian has a very different view on that, looking at the per capita emissions, took some time. Also, to understand that we are not talking only about a single year target, a point target, but that it is about a budget, that we are talking about the integral in mathematics terms, took some time. And on the other side, on the environmental side, it needed some time to get a deeper understanding what it means to transform jobs or to lose jobs in a very short period of time. So I think that the time was needed. But what we should have done better is to start much earlier. It's not only about the time you're you need for a commission or the government, it's also when you start it. And I think we should have started 10 years earlier with the process of phasing out coal. We didn't do so because we didn't believe in our capacity to do the nuclear phase out and the coal phase out at the same time. And with this I will stop. I think we should be more courage. I liked it a lot what our Danish colleague Dan constantly says it here at the COP. They just decided to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 70% until 2030. And when you ask him how they do it, he says, we don't know. But we need to have a target, and we need to trust in the capacity to reach a target, even if we don't know yet how exactly to do it.
Thank you so much for those insights. Please could I ask you to give thanks to our first panelists. I think it's fantastic that we've got such high-level people from Germany, from Canada, from UK, and Scotland. Okay, could I now call up our second panel to the stage? I'll introduce you later. Perfect. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have the opportunity, the great opportunity today, with some very high-level speakers from a range of different backgrounds, a range of different countries, and we're going to drill in a little bit on some of the secrets of how you actually get just transition to happen. I will introduce them as I give them the first questions, and we'll leave plenty of time for a Q&A session, so if people have got questions, please keep them in mind, and we'll have time for those later on in the session. So, I mentioned a report that ISD had produced not so long ago called Real People, Real Change, Strategies for a Just Energy Transition, and we identified a framework of 4 C's for success. We say that in order to have a good just transition, you need to understand the context you're working in, you need to identify champions who are going to push this process forward, you need to make the case for just transition, and you need a range of complementary policies. So, without further ado, I'd like to ask you, Hugo Lucas. So Hugo Lucas is with us from IDAE in Spain. He's the head of Department of Regulatory Framework and Corporate Strategy for the Energy Transition. IDAE is the Institute for Diversification and Energy Savings, so an incredibly relevant institute. Hugo's got a great background in the energy sector over more than 20 years, with the private sector, with IRENA, in the Spanish government, in discussions with Europe and much more widely. So Hugo, I wanted to ask you about the context. The context of Spain. Spain has made huge changes to its energy sector, moving out of coal mining, moving out of coal power generation. When we get off the metro here, there's all the Iberdrola adverts about Pasa en Acción and how they've moved away from coal and into renewables and other things. So what's the context in Spain within which the just transition process was undertaken?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for the kind introduction. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you, the Bundesregierung, for the ENA. So, yeah, you're right, Peter. I mean, in Spain, it is not only about the just transition. In 2019, we have sent to consultation or approved 5 policy documents that we call the Framework for Climate Change and Just Transition. So we have the National Action Plan for 2030, focusing deploying renewable energies, energy efficiency, markets, innovation as well. We have the National Energy Poverty Strategy, because if we are talking about the full decarbonization of the economy without leaving anyone behind, we have to talk as well about the 17% of people in Spain that declare that they are not switching on the heating because of the energy bill. So we have the national strategy as well for energy poverty. And we are going to submit, hopefully in the coming weeks, the long-term strategy for decarbonization 2050, and all these goals are already in the draft law for climate change and energy efficiency. Last but not least is the just transition strategy that I would like to focus now. The transition strategy, of course, is focused mainly in the coal region and also in the coal phase out, and how we are going to deal with the impacts in this region, in these people. So the main instrument within the strategy is the regional agreements. And here I might say that the lesson learned, we have three main coal mining regions in Spain. I think the lesson learned is that you have to start as soon as possible. Because of course, maybe all of a sudden you are not expecting to host a COP in Spain, you know? And then it's better if you have done the job before. Or maybe you are not expecting to have a second election when you thought you won the first and you are going to have a government, you know? So maybe as soon as you start, the better. And also because if we look to the national plan, we are looking into reducing also nuclear, and with a strong support in this location where nuclear is, of course. So you have to start, and the other thing, of course, it has to be a very transparent and participatory process. You have to sit in the table to all the actors. You have to see the industry, the trade unions, academia, civil society, and for us, in Spain, very important as well, the different levels of administration, local administration, regional administration, national administration. So this regional agreement will be monitored and implemented thanks to the Just Transition Institute that will be created as from the old coal region institutes. Funding will come at present mainly by three sources: the European Commission, DG Regio, also from selling the CO2 allowances in the ETS market, but also from national budget. And two more things that I want to say about this agreement: they have a very strong training component, because of course most of us, and in general, we do education and training in the beginning of our professional career, but then we don't do much training while training on the job or training while we are working, and then when this happens, this is really a problem. And of course, we will have also a social plan trying to look for these workers that maybe they are close to the age where they can retire and provide him with good conditions for this. So for the moment, it's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hugo. And I think thank you, Hugo, and I think a lot of things we can drill into further as we go through the conversation there. So please do bear in mind any questions that you might have, and we will have time to ask them at the end. I'd like now to move to our second panelist, or one of our panelists, and think a bit more about identifying the champions behind the process. Really happy that we're joined today by Ms. Irina Stavchuk. Irina was recently made the Deputy Minister for Energy and Environmental Protection in Ukraine after elections in July. And interestingly there, the Ministry of Energy and Coal and the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources were combined into one and became the Ministry of Energy and Environmental Protection. So having those two issues together, energy and environment, of course, very, very important. And again, going back to our theme of everybody here having sort of previous lives and other things they can bring in, Irina was previously Executive Director of Eco Action and a coordinator of the Climate Action Network, particularly its part in European Caucasus and the Central Asia region. So she brings in an awful lot of experiences we can learn from today. Irina, I know it's been a long process of moving away from coal in Ukraine, starting in the 1990s and having all sorts of stops and starts. And really wanted to hear a little bit more about that and sort of who have been the champions in that process.
Overall, there's still, I wouldn't say that we have started the just transition a lot, so it's still a lot of work to be done. After collapse of Soviet Union, some coal mines were privatized, those which were most economically interested, but a lot of coal mines which were not profitable, they stayed under the state governments, and with years the economic performance was worse and worse. And regardless of the huge state subsidies which were going to the coal sector, the issue was not resolved. So every minister who would come, they would be faced with the requirements to invest more in the coal sector to make it profitable, and then with the risk of having strikes of coal miners if the mines have to be closed. So it was actually the first time when the state budget was reduced for the coal sector was with the start of a war with Russia, because most of the coal mines, they were on that territory, so it meant that the state stopped giving these subsidies, and indeed that decreased the share of the subsidies tremendously. Only last year the energy strategy of Ukraine actually put a specific line that the state subsidies for the coal sector has to be phased out, and the new government started to work in this direction. So we actually have the plan to have a timeline when each coal mine closes and work in this area. And even with these strong economic arguments, because it's cheaper to give salaries to the coal miners if they don't go and dig than to give subsidies for this coal to be digged out. But still, over the last 2 months, there were over 5 or 6 strikes with coal miners because they want salaries, and with energy market coming into place, the gap becomes even bigger. So it's, on one side, for the whole state, it really makes sense, but when taking the issue and going through it, it's not so easy. The interesting fact is that when we looked, it's about 40,000 people in Ukraine for the state coal mines, and when this amount of people is breaked in the ages, we realized that the problem is not so big, because some of the people are still young and they can be trained, some of the people are going to the age of being retired, and some of the people would have to stay and work with coal mines to continue its operation. So the issue might not be as huge as it looks like, but of course the social programs are necessary to have this transition not so drastic for people.
Thank you so much, Irina, and we can again get back to some of those issues later. Very interesting to hear how many workers there are, and also your reflection that it's often cheaper to pay salaries than to keep digging coal and to keep the industry going. Very similar experience was had in Poland over the years. They found as well that the level of subsidies required to keep the coal industry going could be used to finance an awful lot of things and to have savings over, for example, giving people early retirement and giving people 5 years' worth of salaries to go and look for other work. And so much money could be saved in that process. Okay, our third panellist, who I'm very pleased to have with us today, is Mr. Li Junfeng. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Li. He's a member of China's National Energy Advisory Council and on the expert committee of the National High-Tech Program. So again, that link between the alternatives and the new programs as well, and also on the Academy Committee of China's Environmental Protection Ministry. He'll be known, I think, to a lot of you from his work at the National Centre for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation, as the president of the Chinese Renewable Energy Industry Association, and he was Deputy Director General of Energy Research Institute within the NRDC in DRC within China. And of course, those of you who've had the opportunity to work with ERI and DRC will know what great organisations they are. So, Mr. Li, thank you again for joining us. Really interested to hear sort of where things are in China, where you think they're going, and sort of any reflections on how the case has been made in China to move away progressively from coal and into cleaner solutions.
Thanks for the invitations for the transition. In the transition issues, especially from the kind of three panelists here before they give the kind of transition, called justice of the transition. I'll give you a little bit of the background of China's COP, how important it is inside China. You say one network is early 1980s. Till that time, China, more than half of the family without electricity. But now, we have everybody have electricity available. Both also have a biggest kind of power industry in the world. You say in the last year, 2018, China's total power generation equals kind of Germany, 20 of UK, maybe 100 of Ukraine, almost like that. It's a quite big. Even the coal, last year we have 5,000 terawatt hours. That means it costs almost 9 Germany total power generations. I think for China's power generation development target, we have 3 this kind of period. In the first period, we try to support Chinese developing purpose for the modernization, supply enough electricity. That's the first period. This is from 1949 until like 2013. Every day they try to equally build a new power plant, no matter hydro, nuclear, coal, natural gas, as many as possible. And remember that in 2007, in a similar panel in UK, in the district park, some people asked me, Mr. Lee, I heard that China every week they should build 1 coal power plant. No, you're totally wrong. We actually said 3. Even without 3, we couldn't set up reach our national demand the target. After kind of 2013, we have gradually tried to use kind of less coal drilling. The drilling that is that we have air pollution issues, we have climate target. So in 2014, our President Xi Jinping said we should gradually improve our energy structures, that's take the energy max, then reduce the coal consumptions, and increase the clean energy consumption. Clean energy in China a little bit different with other countries. We have nuclear, renewables, plus natural gas. This is our clean energy definition. But from now, China has been called low carbon. From 2019, the Chinese have a new strategy for energy. It's a clean, low carbon, high efficiency, and safety. So clean and low carbon become the kind of the target for Chinese energy. Also, China's kind of energy transition have a very big progress. From 2014, the coal consumption is stable, little bit decrease. However, for coal power generation, little bit increased. Reason that we have in the beginning we brought a lot of coal by boilers and stoves. Then we gradually phase out such kind of coal use the coal to be power generation. But from 2014 also we changed that, limited the coal power generation. And so that means we try to have as less as about 1,100 gigawatt. This is the coal ceiling, not over by that. But the coal power generation is a little bit increased, but the percentage that changed a lot. In 2014, the coal power generation takes about 75%. Last year, only 63%. That means 12% will be reduced. Then the renewables increased, especially hydro and wind and solar. Only wind and solar last year took about 10% of their power generation. As the coal reduced 12%, then renewable increased another 10%. The rest they can rely on the nuclear power generation, 3 percentage like that. So that's the Chinese situation. But I'm coming here to talk to all the audience about that. Chinese have a very clear target to phase out the coal. But you should know the difficulties. I said that we have 10 of Germany, 20 of UK. I calculate about that. If every year we reduce 1% of kind of coal power generation, that means we have 100 terawatt hours. That equals almost 1/3 of UK power generation. Even do so, we need, if we are at the similar as the current German situation, we need 60 years. If every year we have to reduce 2%, we need 30 years. So that's a long-term change. The very difficulty, we are not a small country. It's a big one. You need to phase out. From the justice point of view, you see, most of the Chinese coal population, the last time is less than 10 years. If from the justice point of view, if we phase out the coal, we give some subsidy for the investors or not. Also, you say we use so much coal, half our railway to deliver the coal. If without coal, all the railway should be shut down. Then many of the staff work on this area. Do we change or not? We are how to stop them to transition from railway to other sectors. So that's long-term issues. Give China some time. I will have that starting package maybe by 2050. That's from now to 30 years. That means every year have 2% reductions until 2050. Not like Germany, 2022. When Germany has this idea that by 2022 they phase out their nuclear and the coal. Some corporate leaders ask me, Mr. Li, you are the consultant for energy expert. I ask you, if Germany phase out nuclear and coal, what kind of power they use? I said, I don't know. They do not tell me yet. Maybe they use the beer. I know that Germany creates a lot of beer. Maybe use the beer to generate the power. I have no idea yet. But now we know that since the renewables, China have a very good kind of situation. The renewable power generation is cheaper than coal. But we need time to phase out for the kind of investment, for the employment, for everything. We need timing, not overnight. I think that coal reduced gradually 1%, but not so hard. Couldn't like UK, phase out already. Yeah, couldn't like Germany, but we are give a little more time. I think China certainly phase out the coal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Li, for being so candid with us and for laying out the problems and the opportunities in China. And that's also very good to hear that the alternatives are now cheaper than coal, but there's obviously a lot of real organisation of communities and of jobs and of investment to be done as that challenge goes ahead. Our fourth panelist today, very, very pleased to have her with us today, is Ms. Montserrat Mia. Montserrat is currently the Special Advisor of the Just Transition Centre of the ITUC, so the International Trade Union Congress, and she is the former Confederal Secretary on Climate Change and Energy at the ETUC, so the European Trade Union Congress. And she comes originally from the Spanish Union movement. She's been involved in the negotiation of the Just Transition here in Spain, and has experience across the world as well. So our fourth C, Montserrat, was about complementary policies and was about thinking about what do you need to do in order to bring people along with this vision of a just transition. So I'm really interested to hear from you. Firstly, a little bit more about the Just Transition Centre, which I think is an extremely important resource for supporting just transitions around the world as we go forward, and then a little bit more about how these sort of complementary policies can be put together, how you involve communities, workers, unions, and jobs. So thank you very much, Montserrat.
Thank you very much. I don't have too much voice, but I will try to put our vision on the table. Thank you to the German government, to the Canadian government, and the Coal Alliance to invite us. We think that it's very important to listen to the voice of the workers as key players in this transformation. First, I will give a short explanation on who we are. We are the Just Transition Center. We were created by the ITUC and ETUC in 2016 after to see how necessary it was to involve unions in this transformation, and looking that not in all countries, not in all unions, they were ready, or they feel part, or they feel involved in this transformation. That's one of the reasons. To be an instrument to support the unions in Just Transition plans. I'm pleased that today we have two countries as key speakers when we began this event, because in Canada, for example, we have been supporting the Canadian Naval Congress at the time that they dispute inside and how to intervene in this transformation. And we have supported them to create this task force that was an initiative from the trade union movement, and at the end they integrate all the players in this. And they continue playing, because once you build as the ambassador of Canada says, once you build and you have at the end, you convince all the players to be in, you need to begin to work. And you need to begin to prepare the recommendations, and you need to be, as a trade unions, monitoring if the recommendations are putting in place. Because if not, unions, we have seen in Spain, due to what my colleague says, unions lose the faith and lose the trust in that they will be at the end the losers in this transformation, as it happens in the majority of the transformational industrial revolutions in the past. That more or less is what we do. But as a Just Transition Center, we play also with the alliance. With the alliance means we play, we work with companies, we work with countries, with governments, regional governments, and now also we are beginning a very interesting collaboration with cities, especially with Cities 40, because for citizens and workers, the municipalities are the more close administration, and we think that is a good example to begin to work with cities to support unions in these just transition plans. That in the case of cities is not only on the phase-out coal as the alliance is on the mobility, transport, water, energy access, energy to combat energy poverty. It is a large number of topics that are part of this just transition. And I don't want to say that the Just Transition Center is only working on with these people, because we are available to work with communities that they need, because very often there are countries that not all the population is affiliated to unions, like in Germany or in Spain, and we need to work with communities, indigenous communities, for example, in Latin America, when they are victims, I want to say, of the greed of the companies that they want to invade their land and their country, and very often they are killed or they are moved to their regions or their municipalities. We have presented yesterday, I want to say, as a Just Transition Center during this COP, we have been very active, union experience and lessons from our work with different unions and different countries, where we can consider a success. And that is the proof that when you have when you count with the workers, we are part of the solution and not part of the problem. And it's what we try to do at the Just Transition Center. Means I think I have summarized who we are and what we try to do. But I think that yesterday we have also a good example that Just Transition, that by the way, I want to remark that is a topic and is a umbrella declaration that came from the trade union movement. We have been fighting very hard. I remember in Paris was an important work that we have done to include in the preamble the just transition. Now is used in all the events, in all the discussions, but we must not forget that we were the trade union movement, the ones who include the just transition. And what means just transition? Just transition for us means to include in the discussion all the stakeholders. Means to take into account human rights, because human rights have been very present in this COP in Madrid. Human rights are important because you cannot do this decarbonization process without respect women's rights. And also gender equality, that is one topic that at this COP is well they are trying to advance and to make progress, but we are not having the success that we expect. And also just transition is to take into account the rights of the indigenous people, that they are the more ecologists, the number one ecologists in the planet, because where in the places where the indigenous have the possibility to play their role is where the planet is less destructed. Means that we need to support them. And there is an important topic also that I want to remark. All this transformation, including all these stakeholders, needs budget, needs money, needs investment. And that's why we are also, as a trade union movement, as a Just Transition Center, convincing the investors. We are now in a project very interesting where the RTUC is a partner, trying to convince investors, big investors, to invest in just transition. Because if they continue to invest in coal, the company results and the employment is at the stake. There are 1,200 million jobs in the planet that depend directly on the clean air, on the clean atmosphere, clean environment. That's why, that means about the, I don't know, but about the 40% of the jobs in the world. And we need to take into account, if they continuously investing in coal, maybe at the end we will end with the planet, and we will end with the jobs, and we will end with the companies. And that's why we support very much, because I have been part also of the discussions, the Green Deal at European level, because it means more budget, more investment, but we call also the private investors, also the European Investment Bank, the World Bank. We need to begin to invest in people and less in coal and less in companies that they are continuing not understand that coal have a deadline. Coal have a deadline. And of course, we have a double challenge because we represent the workers in the renewable sector and we want to increase the floor of conditions and the floor of wages in those sectors, because until now the salaries are not the same, and we have the problem that we need to convince our workers that new jobs are available, but at this moment the wages and the working conditions are not the same. And that's why we also want that the regions play a role, because we have seen in previous projects that there are regions strongly linked to the coal industry and to the coal history, that they need extra investments. We have been one of the founders of the European Phase Out Coal, the regional platform where the unions are, and we need also to make progress in this work, because if you don't invest, for example, into reskill workers, to prepare workers for the new jobs, first you need to create the jobs, but before you need to skill and reskill workers to have the possibility to access to these new jobs. Because if not, we have the solution of the pre-retirements, those schemes that now are functioning because they are the only solution. And I think that we need to anticipate, and we need to push the people to anticipate, especially governments and companies, because if we not prepare the workers for the new jobs, we will have a big problem, demographic problem, and economic problem.
Thank you so much, Montserrat, for laying out, I think, so many of the key issues there. And if we look at the Canada and Germany commissions that have been recently, it's very clear that the trade unions movement played a very strong role in both of those. Just transition's about people, unions, workers are part of the solution. So, we've got about 15 minutes left. I've got all sorts of other questions I would like to ask the panelists, but would anyone in the audience want to put forward some questions as well at this point? If not, I have a whole stack of good ones in reserve. Lizzie. you could just state your name and affiliation.
Hello, Dark Trump from Bloomberg Village Finance. I want to ask about China. I mean, it was quite positive in a way that you're saying that they're considering between 1 and 2% decrease a year for the coal generation. On the side of workers and the companies, how openly are these topics discussed? Is there already a dialogue? Because we heard so much about dialogue between government and industry. Is this something that's already happening in China, or is it yet to be?
Yes. Yes, there are.
Thank you, moderator. Satoru Mizuguchi, freelance journalist. Several countries have just called transition commissions. Do you think that kind of commission will become a good model for whole industry's transition organizations, commissions? Thanks.
Anybody else want to ask a question? This one could be your only chance.
Afternoon, Richard Folland, Carbon Tracker Initiative, and we've been announced this week as a formal partner of the Powering Past Coal Alliance, and we're delighted with that. My question is actually coming back to the economics and the linkage then with the view that finance and investment take about investing in coal. When Claire O'Neill was speaking earlier, she referred to it a little bit. Quite rightly, this event is focusing on the importance of the just transition. But I'm just wondering if any of the panelists have got a view there, because as a Carbon Tracker, we believe the economics are compelling increasingly around the world, particularly when one matches up coal versus renewables, and that is something that we're saying more and more to investors, financial institutions and so on. So maybe just a sort of view on the economics and on the view of finance and investment on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So, panel, we have questions on task forces, on social dialogue, and on economics. I think it'd be interesting to hear from you as well. Any views you have on how do we finance this? How do we get the money to develop our regions and to find alternative jobs? So, Mr. Leith, I think we'll start with you as you have the question directly to you.
Yes, we do. We do have some kind of a dialogue for compensation. Since you say for the coal sectors, only the coal power related sectors, you say usually every year we build about 100 gigawatt turbines. You will piece out what does the industry, what is the manufacturer, what do they do. We have every year we deliver about 2 billion tons of coal from coal mining to the power plant. Without coal, what do they do? So this kind of dialogue. So we are part of the kind of discussions for that. That's what I mean. We need to phase out gradually. We should give the people to timing to transition. All the Chinese coal power companies have gradually reduced the investment of coal and gradually phase out of them, but it needs timing. That's the dialogue is very important. Make people understand. Also make people understand the outside of the coal plant. Since our China, all the time people want one day to phase out the coal due to polluting issues. However, we couldn't. That's the difficulties. We should also let everybody know that. For the general kind of customers, you should see that we need timing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Look, to you now, Irina. Question perhaps on the task forces as well. Is this something you might look to set up in Ukraine going forward? And about, of course, anything on social dialogue, on economics, or on financing this transition?
We don't have the formal commission set up yet, but the discussions are happening, so I think it's a good idea to set up one. The experience, because I come from NGO, and as NGO we looked at the issue that for so many years the state is unable to address the issue of unprofitable coal mines, how to approach it. And so we were thinking, like, what to do. The ministry was not so much interested. The unions were in Ukraine, they're not really fully representing the workers. So it was also not very good instrument to work with them directly. So the most active partner is municipalities, because municipalities, they understand they have the problem, because the issue is discussed for so many years, so they understand that sooner or later the coal mines will be closed, and they were feeling that nobody is ready to help them, and they are with the problem on their own. So when with German NGO, we brought them to German municipalities, and they told them about their experience when they joined the platform called Regions in Transition. They became much more motivated, they saw solutions, and they became much more interested to work on this issue. So we also, and in terms of funding, that's the most painful issue, because this region are close to the war territory, and they're not so much economically diverse regions. So for them, it's really a big challenge to find the ways how to develop in a just way. But with support with the European Union, and we also try to promote it, we hope that we would have some programs, and we already started to teach them how to develop investment plans, how to work with them, to build their capacity in planning and attracting investments. In terms of economics of coal, it's not an easy issue, because the externalities are not so much included. So it's always very difficult to understand, especially on private coal mines, what is the real price. But sometimes what we hear unofficially is that when Ukraine joins the European electricity grid, the coal mines will not be so much profitable anymore. So that's one of the future economics that we also have to take into account.
Thank you so much, Irina. Let's turn to you, Hugo, and to any of the questions you'd like to answer, or other questions that weren't asked you'd like to answer. Please go ahead.
Maybe two quick comments on the question from the gentleman, if this model can be replicable for the sector. As I mentioned in my introduction, we hope so. Because also in 10 years, from 2030, we are planning to halve the nuclear capacity. And once again, I really liked the introduction from Secretary Flassbach, because he said coal in the general economy of Germany is not that important, but it's really a local and regional issue. So imagine Spain. I mean, I'm here sitting close to China, close to Ukraine, before it was UK, Germany. I mean, for us, this is tiny compared with my colleagues, no? But it's regional. It's regional. And of course, we have direct jobs. I'm not going to cheat you with the figures. 1,576 direct jobs in coal mining. This is not important. Indirect as well, you know. And when you are in front of the 13 people that bought a truck to carry coal from the harbor to the coal power plant, and they read in the newspaper that they are losing the job at the end of the year, then of course figures doesn't matter. Figures doesn't matter. But nevertheless, I think Spain has a tiny problem or challenge compared with my colleagues. And I hope, because then we will be, after the coal phase out, the nuclear phase out, I hope the model will be replicable, going to the regions, talking with all the sector, as explained by my colleagues as well. One comment on the economics of coal. Is that important? I agree with us in the introduction, the colleague from UK. Is that important, the economics of coal? I mean, I agree with my colleague from Ukraine. Thanks to the emission trading scheme, they are paying CO2 allowances, and of course in Spain, they are not producing, they are not profitable. New installed capacity, cheapest PV and wind by far. But we have to look to the economics of the just transition, to the 320,000 jobs that will be created. And be careful, because during the standby of the feed-in tariff, 43,000 jobs were lost in the PV industry. And nobody talk about it, because it's not regional, it's dispersed, and because it's a small and medium enterprises. It's not Endesa, it's not Iberdrola, so they are not in the news. But okay, we will have to deal with that as well. We have to deal with that as well. And then, of course, all the 75,000 million euros over the period that we're going to save in buying oil, opportunities on gender equality. I mean, just transition will only be possible if woman is in the transition. simply because we need engineers, and the percentage of women engineers in Spain is very low. We have to attract them to the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics schools. I mean, I think we have to look to the economic of the just transition and not too much to the levelized cost of electricity of coal.
Yes, I will try to answer your question on the task force, that we have been one of the promoters of this task force. First, you need a government. First, you need a government, and you need a government that has the political will, the political conviction that it's not possible to perpetuate an agony of the coal. That is what happens in Spain. At the end, was a government that had the courage, I don't know if it is correct, that had the political decision to say, I will not continue putting money to maintain those fictional. Because of course there were jobs, and for each person, behind each person there is a history. We have been with the miners in Castilla y León recently, and you cannot say, no, you are irrelevant. No, they are relevant, and they have contributed to the prosperity in our countries during years, during centuries, and they want that no one forgot what they had done. But it's not only a possibility, it's a reality, because we have promoted just transition task force, for example, in Norway, and it's not on coal, it's on oil. Means we are working with the countries, there are countries that there is a mix, and of course, for example, in Nigeria, we are supporting the Labour Congress in Nigeria because they want to see an alternative, because the 80% of the economy is based on oil, on petrol, and they want to know what will happen with them when those jobs will decrease, and they want to be part of this transformation. It's a reality already in New Zealand. That's the question that you need a government, and you need a government with the political decision, political conviction. In New Zealand, we have been preparing the task force directly with the unions in a hostile context, with a hostile government. And when the change arrives, our members were ready. The task force was built, and even the employers that they were not too much convinced, they entered in this transformation because all was ready, even with the complicity, with the commitment, with the new government led by this young lady that was totally convinced that zero net emissions, that she wants to be a champion. No, that means we are working with New Zealand, with Nigeria, with Norway. There are countries that is not coal, is oil and gas, and of course there are now countries already, unfortunately all in Europe, that they are competing between themselves to be the first country with zero net emissions. They are Norway, they are Denmark, and also Sweden. Sweden is asking its sector, and I was with the Sweden government, to prepare just transition plans for cement, for steel, for a lot of industries that are not coal, that need to go faster in the decarbonization process. And allow me to say one thing. I was 2 weeks ago in Moldova. I met with the unions in those regions, and it's true that maybe the trade union movement is not as well organized as in Spain or in Germany. But after the conference, what I bring with me and the message that I will transmit is that they are ready to be part of the solution. You cannot think even in the task force without the trade unions, because they represent the workers well and organized. That is our work also, to organize them better, to be ready. That is the job in the pedagogic way that we are doing, to prepare our unions and our workers to play a role. That means that be in contact with them, because I was with the Ukraine unions in the mine and in the oil sector, and they are ready to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Montserrat, and the other panelists there for the answers to those questions, which I think have very well summarised sort of where we are with this debate. I think we've heard today we have to make coal history. We know the transition is necessary, we know it needs to be just. We know this is difficult, but it's possible, and we've had advice from State Secretary Flaswell and others that acting early is the best way to get started here, to try and make sure that the the problems are identified earlier and the opportunities identified earlier as well. It's really, really hard to try and summarise what we've heard today. I think this conversation could have gone on for another 3 hours, and I wish it could. I know there's lots of other events this week and lots of other initiatives. I think it's pretty heartening that we've got the Just Transition Centre with Montserrat and others as resources. We heard right at the beginning today about the Just Transition Task Force under the PPCA, and offers by everybody on the panels to share experiences and work together. So I think there's the beginnings here of a really strong community coming around Just Transition, and I think on behalf of the organisers, I would like to encourage you all to be part of that. So please join me in thanking our wonderful panel, and please approach them afterwards with the questions you couldn't ask. So thank you very much.